Hopefully you read the same slide coming in, so I don't need to give the title. Although if you have a lanyard, it says mode rather than model, but, we'll get there. All right. I was going to use a clicker. Sorry. Why do I not have slides? Hey, all right. Go away, mouse. So this is me. I'm head of site reliability engineering. If you don't know what site reliability engineering is, don't worry, we'll cover it shortly. And I work for Just Eat, as my hat says. So what's Just Eat? Hopefully Just Eat has quite a large presence in Bristol, both technically and food-wise. But we have 100,000 restaurants and millions of customers in 13 different markets around the world, all with the vision of connecting people to restaurants so they can get food. But this is a tech conference, not a takeaway conference. So what's interesting about Just Eat from a technology perspective? I think it's scale, its size. It's quite scary to see under the hood. We've got over 700 people in tech, 450 active services out there, 1,500 AWS instances in production on a Friday night at peak. As you can imagine, we're very scale up for Friday nights, and you don't have to be quite so scaled at 3 o'clock in the morning. And we do over 500 releases a week, so we're a very DevOps focused company and have been from the start. I've been there for 6 years. When I joined, I think I was the 46th person in our tech department. And we've always had DevOps at our heart. And so this talk's really about how we've scaled that and some of the challenges we've faced and some of the tooling and processes that'll hopefully help you understand ways you can help DevOps scale. Before I can go too much further, we need to agree on what DevOps is. I'm sure you could go and give a whole talk for an hour on what DevOps is. Or, you can have several hours at the pub and still not come to a conclusion. So for the purpose of this talk, DevOps is something that we believe at Just Eat, that dev teams own their products full stop. If you're writing code, I'm not going to be on call for it. You're going to be on call for it. Hopefully you've got a nice team and they'll share that on-call burden with you. But it's up to you to be the one releasing that code. It's up to you to operate that into production. You need to be monitoring that code. You need to be the one that understands what those metrics means. What are the metrics that your code is judged by? And you need to know that so you can then improve your features, plan what goes out next, build what goes out next, and it goes round in a never-ending spiral of doom as you grow. So what's SRE? So site reliability engineering is a term coined by Google in this book that they released in April 2016. And it's all about how Google run production systems. And they kind of use DevOps, but it details sort of the patterns and practices and how they've really scaled DevOps. Unfortunately, 700 people in tech is great. It's not 15,000. And when I talk to those in SRE at Google, and there's 500 of them in the SRE department, and they can assign SRE teams to certain problems. I wish I had those sort of problems. So the site reliability engineering book is all about how Google do it. They've followed it up with a workbook that goes through worked examples. There's another one just come out recently, Seeking SRE, which goes into different companies of different scales and tries to understand how they're doing SRE, because it's really a new sort of, I wouldn't use the word field, it's more of a community, it's more of a a latest buzzword of people to get round and try to understand what it really means. And so, the site reliability engineering is sort of like the Bible. And like the Bible, you can pick and choose the bits you want to believe in. So I'll take you through what I've picked and chosen as I've helped Just Eat grow. But why do we need SRE? So I'm sure you've all heard the expression that trying to manage developers is like herding cats. And I thought this was quite an old expression. I didn't realize how old until I was sort of researching it for this. This is from 1985. And that's nice, but cats are nice, you know. Like, yes, they're difficult to herd, but you know, if one of them runs off and goes out in your garden somewhere you don't really want it out there, it's not much of a problem. You know, if your developers are going off developing stuff that they really shouldn't be, you're like, oh, that's kind of annoying. But you know, you can fix it. You can bring them back in line. If you've got DevOps teams that have keys to your kingdom, that are out there releasing stuff into production, those are no longer cats. So for me, managing DevOps is like herding lions. You know, these are scary beasts. These are self-empowered teams that can go out and bring our entire site down and cost the company millions. And it's a scary role to be in as head of SRE. I'm accountable for the reliability of our site, but I'm not responsible for any of the change that goes out hundreds of times a day. So yeah, I have to try to herd these lions and try to get them to be operationally aware and sensible. So I'm going to start off just sort of telling you sort of at scale when we had to make process change, when we had to bring in tooling, when we had to really wrangle that DevOps into a bit more of a manageable state. And this is sort of Just Eat when I joined. And we had 8 to 10, you know, self-empowered development teams. We had a platform as a service team, so offering sort of the deployment tooling, your CI/CD, some monitoring tooling, you know, because we found it was important that we need to see what goes out. We need, you know, we'll make that easy for people. It wasn't so much around the reliability side when we're doing it this side, but it was more just an ease of use. You know, every development team is going to need to deploy. Every development team is going to need to monitor. You know, let's centralize that. And we offered it as a platform as a service model. So they could take this monitoring, they could take this deployment, but they didn't have to. We really didn't want to stop them doing what they thought was best. You know, there's one down there, let's say they're the app developers at the bottom. You know, if they don't want to use our deployment pipeline, because our deployment pipeline was mainly built around API deployment and database deployments, that's fine. They can go off and do their own way. You know, it's what's been at the heart of Just Eat is leaving these teams to do what they think best, because they're the ones that will know. And at this stage, you know, we're sort of doing about one release a day, and between all those sort of 10 teams, there was only really sort of 6 that were involved in like the real critical core part of the Just Eat flow. And so each of those teams will have someone on call. Most of those teams are about 6 people big, so you know, good sort of 2 pizza team, depending on how fat you are. And then, you know, so you're on call about once a month, once you sort of take holidays into account, which is good rota to, you know, you're not going to get burnt out too much. Hopefully, you know, you're not paged every night for that 1 week. But it meant that, you know, when you were on call, next time you're on call a month later, there'd been 30 releases to the platform. You know, that's sort of a manageable amount to understand. It hasn't changed drastically. You know, so it worked. And you know, because there was only sort of about 6 of these teams that were really looking after the core production, they all knew each other. They were all talking. You know, when an incident went off, it was, oh, it looks like me, or maybe it's you. You know, let's try to get this resolved. You know, we had a very fail fast, fail often, fix forward mentality. And at this size, it really worked. One of the key tools we needed at this stage was observability. So, you know, if you're asking a team to own something in production, they need to see what they're owning. You know, you can't just ship things blindly and hope they're working and then move on to the next thing. You know, that's sort of a no-ops model. It's not DevOps if you don't really have observability. And so monitoring is sort of, you know, spitting out all the stats. You know, we've got a sort of graphite stack in the back and an elastic ELK stack for our logging. Grafana sitting over the top, being able to pull in stuff from the elastic, stuff from graphite, stuff from cloud metrics. We're all in AWS. And this gives us this sort of tooling that allows us to have observability. You know, it's all well and good to say, oh, CPU's shot up on that feature. Oh, we've got loads of queuing over here. But you really need to have the tools that allow you to dig in and understand exactly why that's happening, so you could, you know, fix fast and fail, you know, fix forward. So that was good at that time. And then we grew. So by this stage, we'd sort of doubled in size. We're doing about sort of 5 releases a day across the business. And all those teams that used to be just 6 of them had now fragmented. You know, the ones that used to do menu and restaurant and basket and order were now 4 separate teams. And So now there's about 16 teams really at this. I mean, there's probably 24 in the company, but there's 16 really involved in the live production operation of the site and the apps and orders getting to restaurants. And so it got very difficult. 5 releases a day. Now suddenly when you're coming back on after a month, there's now, I should have written this down instead of trying to do maths in my head, 150 changes to the platform. There can be significant change from when you're on call to the next time you're on call. And if you go 2 weeks without being paged, you've now gone 3 months. You've now gone 450 platform changes before you were last on call. And me having to look over these people and being accountable for the uptime and realizing that there's someone out there that's on call for a core part of our platform that hasn't really been involved in diagnosing a core part of our platform for months scares the crap out of me. And so we also at this stage started to get, as you grow, you lose that community feel. It starts being a lot less, we're all in this together. You try hard to ensure you have a good culture at your company. You're all in it together. But just because there was so many people, there was so many different teams, there was so many different services out there, you started to get a lot more, oh, this doesn't look like my problem. This doesn't look like my problem. Instead of, I wonder what the problem is. The attitude sort of changed slightly. And also, this is where we really because these weren't the same people who had built the system from the ground up, so they didn't have a lot of the same investment in ownership. And what we sort of found was they're motivated by different things. A DevOps team has their own goals, has their own KPIs, has their own metrics they're trying to mush, and it's very different to mine. Mine are all about reliability. I'm not too I'm worried if our feature sets doesn't change over time. But they have very different goals and very different remit to what they're trying to achieve. So we brought in a service operations center to not get in the way, to not slow down. They're not a release team. They're not first line on call. They're not our operations team. They're our eyes on the platform. They're our overseers of the system. So when you get a development team, they have eyes because it's all through our continuous delivery tooling and monitoring. Our operations team will be able to see, hey, look, there was a delivery, an order release today at 11:32. We started having issues at 11:33. I think we should just roll that one back. And a dev team will be like, oh, it was only a small change. It's not our code. No, it must just be coincidental. Because they're smart, empowered people. They don't want to. Their first thought isn't, oh, my code's wrong. Their first thought is, I want to really understand what this is. Whereas from our operations team, their motivation is around the uptime of the platform. So their first thought is, I don't care what this is. Let's roll your change back. If it goes away, we can look into it later. And we changed from a fail fast fix forward into a just reduce MTTR. Because at this size and at this scale, suddenly outages were a lot more expensive for Just Eat. So we needed some ways to help us manage this sort of chaos across so many teams and really understand, well, okay, we've only got one operations team. They've got some run books to help them run some scripts. If they're getting run books from all 20 teams across all 400 services, those aren't all going to be up to date all the time. That's not really going to be helpful. How do we work out what do we care about? And so we brought in tiering. And this originally came out of a disaster recovery exercise where we had to look at what services and what features we would reinstate in what order if we had an outage. And it's since evolved to help us really understand and prioritize a lot of things from the rules to follow for deployments, your on-call response times, how much do we care? And what do we care about? We care about tier 1 most. So this is capture. This is if your service is involved in a consumer placing an order, don't go releasing a massive change on a Friday night. That's not the sort of place to do that. Do that in tier 5, that's fine. And so tier 1's the consumers placing the orders. Tier 2 is processing, so this is getting the orders to the restaurants. And, it's pretty much as important. For most intensive process, for most of our sort of processes and policies, tier 1 and 2 are treated interchangeably. But there is a slight difference in the fact that if your food arrives 2 minutes later than we said it would, you're probably just going to assume the driver was a bit late. You're not going to realise that maybe our order processing system fell over and had a blip for 2 minutes and we recovered. we can have small outages like that in the tier 2. If we have those in the tier 1, we lose those customers. If we have those in the tier 2, as long as they're short enough, we're fine. And tier 3 is all around enhancement. So tier 3 is pieces of the core platform, but we don't really need it for tier 1 and tier 2. So things like reviews, things like ratings, things like offers, stuff that enhances the consumer experience, enhances the restaurant experience, but we can operate without them. And those that saw Joe Woodward's talk earlier knows there's patterns and practices you can use to test these things. And we do. So, I have to take it on trust when a team says, oh, our feature's tier 3. It's fine. If it's not there, the consumer can still place an order. I don't take it on trust. We test these things. We tear it out, we run in a staging environment. We have load tests covering, core ordering functionality, and we turn off all tier 3 features, or tier 4 and 5 as well. Make sure that core order flow isn't impacted. We have to test these things. We have to ensure, we've grown away from being able to trust DevOps teams. We really need to ensure and put checks and balances around them. And just because he talked about chaos engineering, it's one thing to be able to operate without them. It's another thing to be able to operate with latency. So that's where we evolved that to. We can now inject latency across all our tier 3 features, and that's when you really see who's got proper circuit breaking. There's a service mesh talk, I think, later. Go to that if you want to see how to do this really well and automated. The other thing we had to do, again, it came back to that trust model of how prepared are these engineers. I haven't been involved in hiring all 700 people across our tech department. Certainly done my fair share, but not all 700. And so, we had to set up an on-call boot camp. What does it mean to be on call? All of our engineering department has now been through this. It forms part of, it's not really a thing you do in induction because you don't really know, but normally at Just Eat, you will have deployed to production within about your first 2 weeks, and you'll probably be on call after about 3 months because you need to know and understand the body of all the tools that your team operates. And so usually in that 3 months, towards the end there, you'll attend one of our on-call boot camps. And these are 2-day sort of intensive exercises where it's the tooling. This is PagerDuty, this is how you acknowledge, this is how you respond. This is, your team should have taken you through your monitoring, you should have all this visibility. But it's also around the sort of process, when you should escalate, what chat channels we use, when it needs to go to a voice channel, and it also helps just with the sort of community side. So it's the service operations team again. It could be these engineers' first interaction with them, and I would rather that first interaction be a 2-day boot camp than Friday night at 7 o'clock. So we also run some war games in there. We'll try to look at who's attending the boot camp. And if it's mainly from a certain platform or a certain feature or a certain service, we'll find someone that knows that service and get them on board, and we'll go through, okay, what's the fail scenario? What are we going to inject? How are we going to, spin this up in a QA environment, or usually staging, so that's where we have a lot more of the sort of PagerDuty and that sort of tooling all integrated. And we'll introduce latency or scale down their database, or cut some connectivity somewhere, and we just play through with them as a team the process of diagnosis, of communication, that sort of thing. And that, with these sort of 2 bits, bringing in the operations center, bringing in the on-call, bringing in the tiering structure, really meant, okay, we're happy having these 20 DevOps teams, and we believe we're getting a reliable platform out of this. So, of course, Just Eat grew again. One of the joys of working at such a well-performing company, we keep growing, and your challenges are never the same thing again. So I can't put 70 developers up there, 700 tech people. But at this stage, we're looking at like sort of 500 releases a week is what we do now. And our services were not fit for the number of people, the number of different flavors, the different types of ways people were trying to deploy, the different things people were trying to monitor. So we had to grow our sort of service team, and this all falls under sort of the reliability banner now. So we've got a monitoring team, we've got a deployment team, we've got a testing team, some kind of diagnostic testing. It was the logo I was going for, and they own testing infrastructure, but they don't own the tests. It's the DevOps team. They own their testing, they own their production. So they'll own the testing scripts, but it'll be our sort of testing team that will take them and run them and play the part of the customer. because quite often, in the worst sort of case scenarios, when something breaks, our customers call the call center. Hopefully our alerting and monitoring has caught it before a customer even notices. But for the purpose of sort of running load tests across the platform, it's that team that plays the part of the customer and looks at, okay, this is benchmark compared to where we were last week. We're not doing the same amount of orders per minute. Something's not right. That side of things. And we've got a database team, again another terrible icon set, and they're we were originally a turn of the century .NET company, so there was a giant SQL database in the back end. But now, as we're in the cloud fully, there's Dynamo, there's S3, there's every flavor of RDS, and we've still got the SQL. So that team's a lot about, all these teams can't hire their own DBAs, and most of them wouldn't need to, but damn near all of them have data, and damn near all of them store data. And so that team works on a lot more sort of services and support model to ensure, you're setting up your database in the right way, your backups are running, they sort of do the auditing of, are you storing critical data? Is it backed up? Is your service, highly available? Is it all been set up properly? And then our operations team had to change as well. So they, runbooks are good when they're good. When they're out of date, they're worse than useless. So what we really sort of sat down with them and looked at it was, rather than, we'll have a runbook for every team in case. But realistically, it's a DevOps team. They're responsible. We can page them. They should be able to sort it. But what we needed from operations team was that real reduction in MTTR. So what were the common actions? What were the things that they were doing, from these runbooks? What's the buttons they're pushing, all the scripts they're running, putting it all into a nice tool for them. And again, a script's just as likely to fall out of date as a runbook. So we have a testing process. So most of the scripts in that tooling is tested weekly, some of them monthly if they're a bit more impactful. But sort of 9 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday, if you go to place an order for about a minute there, you won't see any reviews or any offers or anything like that. We turn all that stuff off in production for a minute, turn it all back on. So we make sure, we battle test these things. So if we have to, on a Friday night, use this button, we are damn confident that it works. So this is what we sort of had to bring in, really. We got some nice tooling, and we grew some more teams, but we were still missing a real sense of accountability and ownership in our DevOps teams. They were happy to own their stuff in production, they were happy to look at it in production, but they really want to spend their time deving. They were developers at heart, they weren't operations people. And so we had to bring in a series of rituals to just make sure they were playing the right side and giving as much attention to the operational side as they were to the dev side. So we run a daily production meeting. So every morning during the week at 9:30, we get together with myself and the CIO, the heads of most of the product delivery departments, and we sit down and we go over, in the last 24 hours, what's the noise in our platform? And sometimes it's a really short meeting. There's three little issues. A third party had a blip. We just saw some queuing somewhere that we didn't quite understand. And that meeting just helps us understand, one, what's the current health of the platform at the moment? And two, if it is a serious thing, is it resourced appropriately to fix it? The people in this meeting have the authority to change backlogs, to prioritize things. If, it was a serious outage, there's people in that meeting that are like, oh, okay, yeah, this is our number one priority now. I'll get all the people we need until this is solved. And we also, we sort of change the flavor of that day on day. So on a Monday, it looks out over the whole weekend, and it's quite a long meeting and covering a lot of issues. On a sort of Thursday, we do more of a weekly recap. How are we looking this week? What's changed since last week? How are we feeling going into the weekend operationally? And that's from a retrospective one from incidents. But then on a Thursday, so we shut our release window on a Thursday. We don't let anyone release on a Friday, just because if we can get through a Thursday night, we're pretty confident we can get through a Friday and a Saturday. And Friday and Saturday, as you can guess, is the biggest times for ordering takeaway. So I don't really want a lot of change in our platform in between a Thursday night and a Friday night, which is almost sort of double the order number. And so we have an operational review. So this is where all the on-call engineers on a Thursday afternoon will all get together. usually before they before they travel home. And they go over what's been released, what's the changes that we've put out into the platform, and it just helps them all understand, oh, we've got this in beta, we're canarying this at the moment, oh, we made this significant change, or we changed, we've got these experiments running, and it just gives them, as a, they're the on-call community for that weekend, it gives them an understanding of the high-level change that has gone out in this platform. We also do some peak on-call, so for some of our more serious tier 1 features that we're not as confident that in the operational practices are being adhered to, where we have some concerns about the reliability or the noise we've seen on those features, we'll make those developers watch the graphs on a Friday night over peak. It's at a tech conference, you really expect to hear all about the amazing tools we've got to automate this and all the detection of imbalance between. If you're doing that at scale on traffic that changes like ours, day on day, week on week, hour by hour, please come talk to me. we've tried various different things. We do have alerting, of course we do. We do really understand it. It is mostly those that fire, but there's nothing quite like a pair of eyes on the system to go, that looks a bit weird. Why is it quite doing that? It doesn't normally look like that, and just to spot those little differences and little bits of noise. And again, just because it's time to recover that we really care about, get that MTTR down. If someone's sitting there, that 5 minutes of paging to responding to logging in is now cut down to almost nothing. So it just really helps with that where we need it. But that's not everyone. We don't make all our on-call engineers sit there and watch graphs every Friday night. So for those that don't, the majority of them, we do Graph Club. So on a Monday, go sit down, spend some time, review all your graphs from the weekend. So try to recreate that same. There's nothing better than someone watching the graphs, but without having to do it on a Friday night. And then they'll go through and watch them on a Monday. We run an on-call handover, so we don't. The teams do. We specify you should. So this is when whoever was on call last week catches up with whoever's on call the next week. Just it could be 5 minutes, could be half an hour. Here's what's been going on the platform. Here's what I've seen that's funny. Here's some incidents I was dealing with. Hand it over to the next person, just so there's that continuality of incidents if they are looking into anything or spotting patterns. We also do a daily production load test. So this goes back to that team that owns the sort of testing infrastructure. We're quite lucky that our traffic isn't distributed evenly across the whole day. We're quite unlucky that it peaks so high and troughs so low. But so what we do normally for the markets we operate in, our release window will shut about an hour before sort of peak traffic starts picking up. And in those countries, we'll then run a load test in between release window freezing and peak traffic starting. We really hit it with pretty much what we expect to see on a Saturday night, regardless of whether it's Monday. I want to make sure my platform right now can hold what it needs to on Saturday. And we just report on those. And they less and less now they pick up sort of integration test issues, stuff that you would expect to have been picked up in the process. When we first sort of started bringing them in, they really picked up a lot of that. Your integration tests aren't quite good enough. It's not our responsibility, but we're happy to make the production platform safer. It just gives us that nice warm fuzzy feeling as you go into peak that we've already seen more than peak traffic on this exact same platform. So I mentioned some tools there. I'll just sort of show you some of them. This is our sort of traffic management one. These are sort of types of buttons that we have that we test on a weekly basis. I chose the payment side of things. It's probably less sensitive, but obviously we can turn off save cards across our platform if we're seeing issues. We've got sort of different payment providers. We can fail over between them. Again, it's things we've looked at automating, but when we look at the process and the conversations that take place before we switch it over, it's not as black and white as we'd like. It's very infrequently is it a complete failure of a payment provider. More often it's a bit of noise and a bit of latency. How many customers is it affecting? How many countries is it affecting? Should we switch it over here? So we still have our operations team sort of making those decisions for us, and they're a smart bunch. They'll understand and work towards automating these as and when we can. we do automate for the ones that are more obvious. Those of you that are on O2 may have noticed this morning your phone was being a bit funny. So this is another great sort of story around our sort of operations side. So it sounds weird to be talking about an operations team when I say we do DevOps, but each of those DevOps teams, which one of those DevOps teams is responsible for O2? Right? None of them. None of them build O2's network or deploy it. Whereas our operations center, we're looking at there and going, oh, look, order rate's dropping. That's weird. Wonder what? Oh, look, it's all O2 devices. Oh, look, all of our restaurants on O2 networks have switched over, failed over to a different network. Oh, okay, let's raise a case with O2. Let's try to get an understanding of when this will come back. They're that holistic eyes on the platform that you still need, even with DevOps teams. This is a good one. So everything sort of previously has been sort of a lot more reactive, and reactive is no fun. Judging a team by how many incidents they've had is okay, but realistically, the feature that's had the least incidents in the last 12 months has been one that no one's ever touched in the last 12 months. The one that's had the most incidents in the last 6 months is probably the one that the engineers are really working on and moving and improving and changing the quickest. I don't want to stifle change. I don't want to hurt that team just because they're trying to make what they do better and improve the service offering. So we really, as an SRE team, try to focus on how can we empower them to make the right decisions without necessarily being just reactive to incidents. And with all engineers, gamification is a brilliant way to get around their backlogs or their politics or their managers or anything like this. You give an engineer a 70 and they'll come back and go, well, how can I make this a 90? So we built Just Eat scorecard system, and I blatantly stole this off a LinkedIn system that I saw presented at SRECon, and it's awesome. So here we can see for Global Device Platform is the name of one of these DevOps teams. We can see 3 of the features that they own, 3 of the services that they manage, and the scores they have, the tiering they are. We can see Snoopy API. Should have chosen one without stupid names. Is an A. It's not an A+. Oh no, but it's tier 3. Is that okay? Again, I'm not to say. It's not my decision to say every tier 1 feature. Well, tier 1 feature you need to be an A+. It's not up to me to say tier 3 is okay to be a B or okay to be a C or it has to be an A. But it's up to me to let the team know what we see across the estate and what we really believe reliability is. So if you dig into one of these, if we open up Snoopy API, without trying to give away too much, what we really look at. So we look at your rate of release to rollbacks. We look at how much of your infrastructure is stored in code. We look at how if your pipeline's stale, if there's code in trunk that isn't in production, if you've got dependencies that are out of date, if you've got deprecated dependencies, we bring in all the metrics we can from Jira, from our deployment pipeline, from our monitoring system, from our logging, and we try to pull that together to create a score that they can go into and understand why they've been scored like that and what it means. And we have to be really careful when we change the score because it will, we introduce a new rule and within 2 weeks everyone's fixed it. It's the little ghost up in the corner. I'm sure you all remember Spectre Meltdown. Suddenly everyone had to, patch all your servers. So we're in the cloud, so hopefully we don't have to patch servers. Everything still had to be relaunched with a new baked AMI. And, one of our platform teams, baked us new AMIs. We've got those out. Now we need 70 teams to redeploy 500 features across our global estate. Bugger me. Like, previously, before Scorecard, this would have been some project manager and a Jira ticket or a spreadsheet and just trying to chase people. We can get some comms out, we can tell everybody, but who's going through and checking you've all done it? Who's chasing up those that haven't done it? Badges. Developers love badges. We brought this into Scorecard. We still have to do the same comms. You still have to message out, there's a new badge available. If your Spectre Meltdown matches, you can get a lovely little badge. Do it at the comms, do it at the all hands, make sure everyone's aware of it. And it was like a project that would have been like 6 months long tail of someone just chasing individual teams was turned around in about 3 weeks. That was something we really were happy with and felt proud of. And now it's almost too popular. So now we've got other departments wanting their own scores to come out and be published in it. So the security team have their own security assessment stuff that they run across every team. They're looking at getting that in. QA Guild have certain standards that they'd like people to be adhering to. We don't want to influence our score with stuff that isn't quite reliability, but so we're looking at a way to bring in some sort of multifaceted scoring system and enhance it. But everyone's found it's a really good way to, that non-critical work that no one's ever going to prioritize on their backlog, you can sort of get it done if it's important. Oh, come on. So that's about me done. But so yeah, this is what we use at Just Eat. This is our SRE. This is what, when we sat down as a team and went, why do we do what we do? How do we understand what we should be doing, and what should we be doing at all? And most of us sort of engineering background, so of course that had to come out as code rather than a Gantt chart. But if your reliability score is less than your desired reliability, we're the SRE team. Let us help you. We set up all those rules. We said, what dependencies were bad. We said how you had to set up your security groups for least ingress or whatever. If we said you should be on ALBs instead of ELBs because they're flaky. But if you haven't done it, and you need to do it, if you have features that you really believe need to have that high level of reliability, we'll second people out into your teams. We'll work with you to take you through the process. Some of the changes can be a little bit fiddly and a little sort of 3-stage deploy, and there's no point in every dev team tripping over that same rake and making those same mistakes. So we'll loan out people, not to do it for you because we don't want to be on call for your stuff, but to help you do it and understand the process you should be taking to improve reliability across your services. And if you are doing good, if you're doing better than you need to be, then we'll highlight you. We talk about the good teams. We highlight good practice at the, on our internal blogs or at the sort of operational all hands. We'll get up and talk about things that went really well, or teams that are, that are going beyond, or newer, better ways that you can enhance the reliability of your services. And we also look at increasing freedom. So there's some process and policy that we have to impose to herd these lions. And if you're doing really well, you don't have to be looking at graphs on a Friday night. If all your stuff is more reliable than it needs to be, that's fine. You can just check on a Monday morning that everything was great. Hopefully we'll get to the stage where the release windows get wider and wider. Release windows across multiple countries and multiple time zones gets really difficult, and it's probably our developers' biggest bugbear at the moment. But we want to give them a set of metrics that will say, well, here's what you need to do, here's what you need to achieve. We'll put it into scorecard. You'll have, everyone will drop. If you can get back up to that level, we can influence you, we can change your release policy and process and give you more flexibility in how you release. That was me. Obviously just need a stall here because we're recruiting and because we're invested in the tech community at Bristol, sorry. We are, massively, it's awesome. Yeah, cheers, thanks.
So, thanks Benny, great talk. Any questions? So, Adam's got a microphone, so all the talks are being filmed today. So if you could just wait for the microphone, and Benny, if you could just repeat the question as well as we go.
So we get it twice?
Yeah,
fair enough.
So we definitely know.
That was a really great talk. What do you do if the problem that hits your systems has come from a rolled out mobile app, which it takes a long time to roll back, but it's hurting your service?
So we used to have our own sort of hand-cranked way of betaing for apps. Sort of services were put behind sort of config, call this API, what version am I supposed to be serving? But the App Store, both Google and Apple now support phased rollout, and they support forced upgrades. So yeah, we don't release externally our apps as often as we do internally. So we beta them sometimes multiple times a week, at least weekly. As an employee, I get a new beta every week of the iOS and the Android. But we only really release them publicly about every month. If every time you turn on your app it wanted to download a new Just Eat, you'd get pretty annoyed with the app. So we release monthly for those, and it's a staggered phase one. We'll put out sort of a percentage of traffic, 1%, over a weekend, and then crawl not only our internal metrics but all that's tracked in Google Analytics, and you can really see between the different versions what's my conversion rate. It's a lot more of the business metrics that we really care about for the Android and iOS releases. And then with those, you can roll those back.
Any more questions? All right, guess we're done. Thanks again.
Cool.
Cheers.